संसारप्रतिबोधार्थं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यत्सत्येन जगत्सत्यं यत्प्रकाशेन भाति तत् यदानन्देन नन्दन्ते तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यस्य सत्यमिदं यद्भाति मानुरूपतः प्रियं पुत्रादियप्रीत्या तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। येन चेतायते गीतं चित्तं चेतायते नयं जाग्रत्स्वप्नसुषुप्त्यादि तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यस्य ज्ञानादिदं विश्वं न दृश्यं भिन्नभेदतः सदेकरूपरूपाय तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यस्यामतं तस्य मतं न भावाय तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यस्य कारणरूपस्य कार्यरूपेण भाति यत् कार्यकारणरूपाय तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नानारूपमिदं सर्वं न केनाप्यस्ति भिन्नता कार्यकारणता चैव तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। यदग्रे कमलद्वन्द्वं द्वन्द्वतापनिवारकं तारकं सर्वदा प्राज्ञं श्रीगुरुं प्रणमाम्यहम्। शिवे क्रुध्ये गुरुस्त्राता गुरुक्रुध्ये शिवो नहि तस्मात् सर्वप्रयत्नेन श्रीगुरुं शरणं व्रजे। वन्दे गुरुपदं द्वन्द्वं वाङ्मनश्चित्तगोचरं श्वेतरक्तप्रभाभिन्नं शिवशक्त्यात्मकं वरम्। ऋकारं च गुणातीतं ऋकारं रूपवर्जितं गुरुर्विद्यास्वरूपं च अत्रिनेत्र सर्वसाक्षी अचतुर्बाहुरच्युतः अचतुर्वदनो ब्रह्मा श्रीगुरुकलिकाप्रिये। अयन्मयाञ्जलिर्बद्धो दयासागरविक्रये यदनुग्रहतो जन्तुश्चित्रसंसारमुक्तिभाग्। श्रीगुरो परमं रूपं विवेकचक्षुषोऽमृतं मन्दवाज्ञानपश्यन्ति अन्धा सूर्योदयं यथा। श्रीनाथचरणद्वन्द्वं यस्यां दिशि विराजते तस्यै दिशि नमः कुर्यात् भक्त्या प्रदीयं प्रिये। तस्यै दिशि सततमञ्जलिर्सहाये प्रक्षिप्यते मुखरितो मधुपैर्बुधैश्च जागर्ति यत्र भगवान् गुरुचक्रवर्ती विश्वोदयप्रलयनाशकनित्यसाक्षी। श्रीनाथादिगुरुत्रयं गणपतिं कीटत्रयं भैरवं सिद्धौघं वटुकत्रयं पदयुगं दूतिक्रमं मण्डलम्। तत्त्वं ज्ञानात्परं नास्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। मन्नाथ श्रीजगन्नाथो मद्गुरु श्रीजगद्गुरु ममात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ध्यानमूलं गुरुर्मूर्ति पूजामूलं गुरुपदं मन्त्रमूलं गुरुर्वाक्यं Thank you. Bye.
Sangunath Maharaj Ki Jai. We're all back here in the room now, right? Okay. As you well know, on Sunday, Satsang this year, what we've been studying, discussing, contemplating has been the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And it continues for a couple more months. So welcome to that occasion. Another version, both here in person and everyone out there around, I guess around the world. In thinking about what we could discuss and reflect on today, a few things came to me. And I probably should just set it up a little bit. And first of all, I want to say that I'm likely going to be jumping around a bit here and there. So just be aware of that. It's been really laid out beautifully, I keep saying, by Nityeshwari and Dana. So they've been working us through the Yoga Sutras. And I tend to come in and I'll talk about some of the things, and we'll just reflect and go a little bit deeper in those areas. So we'll be jumping around from the beginning to the middle to the end, and hopefully there's connections there. I think one of the major points I'd like to start out with, the idea of this was that yoga is finding the light that already exists. It's not about creating anything. It's actually not even about going anywhere. It's not a line, even though we use the metaphors and the analogies of going along a path. As we pursue it, what the sages and the scriptures are telling us is that there's actually nowhere to go. What we're really trying to do is recognize that that light which we feel like we're seeking already exists within us. And so the beginning of the Yoga Sutras, and I'll be probably focusing more on Swami Satchidananda's version. Some of you may be familiar with that. There are many different commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. He makes the same point that everybody makes. At the beginning, when it says yoga is the stilling of the modifications, the thought waves, the mind stuff, the mind stream, whatever way you want to interpret that, that is the essence of yoga. And when that happens, yoga happens. When that happens, yoga happens. But I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that yoga is different from our normal undertaking, so we're not trying to strangle the mind and make it forcibly stop, because we can sometimes think like that that's what it's about, and it's not that. It is a process that brings us to a stilling of the thought waves. And that is the subtle aspect of it. And then the question becomes, how do we engage in that process, work with it, such that yoga happens? So we have the 8 limbs, and most of us are familiar with that. We've been looking at that through the course of this. And those limbs are really about each one of them getting us more and more into that state of being able to become quiet, still, to let that light which exists shine. Goes on out here, what is it about? Is about celebrating that light, celebrating the light that already exists within us. It is about, in fact, if you want to use another metaphor, it's about the light that overcomes the darkness, be it within or without. Or if you want to be more dramatic, some people will say good overcoming evil, if you will. But the only real difference between good and evil from a yogic point of view is it light, lightness, or is it dark? And that means, is it awareness and deep, profound understanding, or is it ignorance? That is the lack of knowledge of our true nature. So we're just going around and around these basic themes again and again. And in each of our lives, those themes just keep playing out in various ways. And what we're doing in our practice of yoga is really trying to come to that quiet point of light that already exists, and living more with that, from that, into the lives that we have. That's a long introduction. Anyway, so I would say, think now, try to place yourself inside. Let us, it's just something we can try. Try to place ourselves inside what Patanjali is saying, or any scripture. So in other words, move it from a study of something outside of ourselves to something which is ultimately inside of ourselves. Because Patanjali, when he laid out the Yoga Sutras, wasn't creating something from out here. He was taking the essence of the spiritual journey and putting it into a format. But all he was trying to express was, if you follow this format, you will come to know your own true nature. So place yourself inside what the scriptures are saying. So when the scriptures say, yoga is the stilling of the mind, if we get inside of that, what does that actually mean? I'm going to be reading a few things for you today. One of them is this. Okay. My notes. It's starting with a quote from Saint Tirumala. He says this. This is part of Satchidananda's commentary. A person was running and running in search of the light. He spent his whole life doing that. Ultimately, he collapsed and died because he couldn't reach it. That's the essence, the core of the quote. Then the commentary that Swamiji provides with that is, millions and millions of people collapse in just this way or some similar way because they don't know that the light is within. The light is within. Another way of saying this is, even if you practice yoga for 8,000 years, you're not going to reach the light. By this, he means external yoga. Even if you practice external yoga for 8,000 years, I don't know where you got that figure from, you're not going to be successful. In other words, reading books, learning all the scriptures by heart, going on pilgrimages to all the temples, ashrams, and churches in the world, that is all external practice. Some people waste thousands of years in such effort. If we only look within, we will see the light as if we were seeing our own image in a mirror. Now, this is where it gets tricky on the yoga path, because we can sometimes think, so does that mean we shouldn't be doing any yoga? We shouldn't be doing any practice found in that. That we have to understand that even as we're practicing something on the outside, the point of it is to move us to the inside. Yeah? Because that's where the light is. This is the whole point. So all the limbs, all the practice, they're all about that. And it's very easy to get caught up in the external because we're doing it, and not realizing that that's to bring us to something within. So that's one of the first things. And so it's not like a new sutra that I'm talking about, but it is, I think, the way to bring all of the sutras that we're exploring and reflecting on and contemplating to life. Just that awareness. It's all about what is within. He mentions a word there, the seer, the self, and implications of the mind. And then the next sutra follows that up by saying, then the seer, the self, the seer, the self, the light within, abides in its own true nature. Abides in its own true nature. The seer is that which knows, is what he's saying here, but is not actually involved. So the seer is always undisturbed, always pure, always just this light that shines. And everything else is going on around it, but it's not affected by it. Another way of saying that is to say the seer is the subject, the eternal subject, the eternal light. And everything else is the object. Everything else is the object. From the most physically condensed, hard substance material to our thoughts and emotions. It's all. Example, he said, it's like the face. If you look in the mirror and see your face, you can say, okay, I see my face. That's easy. But actually, if the mirror is distorted, what happens to your face? It looks distorted, doesn't it? It's like, if there's some dust, if it's, wavy mirror. And so what you see as yourself is distorted by what's going on out there. So think of that as an analogy for the way the mind, the world impacts our experience, which is why he says yoga is stilling of all of that. We have to still that to truly see ourselves, because otherwise the subject and the object, they're getting wound up together. And it's unclear as to, well, who am I really? Am I all this stuff that's happening to me? Am I up? Am I down? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I this? Am I that? As we get caught in all of that, is what the sages are saying. That's the problem. There's no problem with the light within. But we can't really experience that until we get a clean mirror, i.e. a still mind. A still mind meaning so that whatever might be going in the mind, is not distorting who we truly are. And therefore we don't see the light of our own self. So the face, if you think about it like that, is just another little analogy that can be useful in thinking about ourselves. And so every time, he points out to us, every time we go with that, with what's happening out here and are impacted by it, we lose our yoga. We lose our yoga. We get caught in everything that's going on out there. And the purpose of yoga is to bring us back. So yes, those practices are incredibly important from that perspective, because they allow us, hopefully, to bring ourselves back to our true selves. And it takes time. So, the light and the face, these are the things that can be very useful in thinking about it. Another jump around. Come back to that. Okay. As we move through let me just start here. As we move through these different stages, we find, as I said before, the need for practice. And Patanjali makes it very clear early on, Sutra 14 in the first pada. Practice is important, and it becomes firmly grounded when well attended for, he points out 3 things: a long time, without break, and in all earnestness. A long time, without break, and in all honestness. Because what he said just before is that all these mental modifications can only be restrained by practice. Now, there's 2 sides. He says practice and non-attachment. So practice is something we do. Non-attachment is not a doing. And it's probably why it's so tricky and challenging for most of us. Because practice, okay, we've just been doing some, and we're going to do more, okay? We can do that. Vin's playing the harmonium, we have Dipanji, he's going to play the drum. It's all, and we get into it, and the Shakti flows, and it's very powerful. But non-attachment, how do you do that? So non-attachment is a non-doing. It's a non-doing. It's a letting go. It's a release. It is not being, so it's a subtle effort. That's how I think. Getting steadiness, evenness of mind, so that we're not pulled away from our true self. So non-attachment is about not being attached to those things that pull us away from our true self. And this is where yoga gets, in a way, challenging for us. Because we live a life, all this is going on, wonderful things are happening, difficult things are happening, all sorts of things are happening, and it's very easy to get carried away by any of those things. the ultimate teaching of yoga is what? The sages, and what we find here is that, but none of that is you. None of that is who we truly are. And most of that is going to take us away from our true self. And the worst news is that most of it, ultimately, of that is going to end up in some sort of pain. So what the sages are saying is non-attachment is important. Because then, this is I don't know why this example comes to my mind. Most of us remember the story, or the movies even, or the TV shows, if we're, depending on what generation we're in, of Tarzan in the jungle. Yeah? And one of the things he was really good at, apparently, was flying from, or, using the vines. And I didn't always, but as I started to get into yoga and study it, that image came to me. It helped me, funnily enough, understand non-attachment. Because you see, if you're swinging through the trees on vines, from vine to vine to vine, what is the worst thing that you can do? Be attached. Because if you're holding onto one vine and you're trying to go to the other and you don't let go, not a good look. Not at all. I said, But the one you're holding on to feels so secure, doesn't it? And so non-attachment is about that, about recognizing you can't hold on. This is, we hear it every day. There's nothing that stays forever. There is nothing that stays forever. And the holding on to it as if it's going to stay forever will only ultimately create pain. These are just offerings. Hopefully they're useful. So, to change really our mindset and our way of understanding of ourselves, Patanjali is saying, practice. Keep practicing. And another practice is non-attachment. And he says you have to do it for a long period of time. He doesn't, by the way, say how long. Clever, isn't it? He just says for a long time. And to really hammer that point, he says without break. So just keep doing it. It's just like we have to keep doing it without a break. And then the real tying it together is with all earnestness, with a kind of devotion and feeling. All of this is important because this is what transforms that mind stuff, ultimately. Otherwise, he also points out how it's just so easy to slip back of asanas or some scars, or karma, all of that just pulls us back in those old patterns unless we do it for a long time, without break, and with earnestness. And earnestness, Swamiji points out, is patience, devotion, and faith. Patience, devotion, and faith. There's a story, it's an interesting story that he uses that I thought I might share with you and might find useful. And it's about the great sage Narada. The great sage Narada. He is a divine being that goes from the heavens down to the earth. And there's a particular story. And this story is about one of Narada's travels. And he's going through a forest, and he sees a young student who'd been meditating for a long time. The ants, in fact, had built a whole anthill around his body. The yogi looked at Narada and said, "Narada, sir, where are you going?" Narada looks, he says, "To heaven, to Lord Shiva's place." Oh, okay, great. Could you do something for me while you're there? Sure. What do you want? He says, well, could you find out from the Lord how long, for how many more births I have to meditate? I've been sitting here for quite a long time, so please, could you find out? Narada, being a divine being, said, sure, no problem. So then Narada walked a few miles further and he found another man. But this one was jumping and dancing and singing with all kinds of joy. Hari Ram, Hari Ram, Hari Ram. He didn't say if he was in an airport or anything like that. But anyway, he was ecstatic. So when he saw Narada, he had a similar comment. He said, oh, Narada, where are you going? Narada says, to heaven. He says, great. Could you please find out how long I have to be here doing this? How many more lifetimes before I find ultimate liberation? And Narada says, sure, not a problem, I will. And that just passed. And after many years, Narada happened to be coming back along the same route again, and he saw the first man. And the yogi recognized Narada. He said, Narada, what happened? I haven't heard from you. You didn't get back to me. It's like, come on, what did I do? Yeah. Anyway, did you go to heaven? What did the Lord say? Narada says, yeah, I asked, but the Lord said you have to take another 4 births. What? 4 births? After all of what I'm doing here? What, haven't I been doing this long enough? He started shouting and screaming. And Narada's like, oh, okay. He let it be. He's smart, Narada. He just kept walking. When he walked farther, he saw the second man, the one who'd been chanting and doing all of that and enjoy. And he says, Narada, there you are. What happened? Tell me. What's the story? You got some news for me. Narada says, yes. So? Narada says, you see that tree there? He says, yeah, sure. Can you count the leaves on it? Sure, I have the patience to do it. Do you want me to count them now? He said, no, you can take your time. And then the fellow goes, but what does it got to do with my question? Well, Lord Shiva says you will have to take as many births as there are leaves on that tree. The response is interesting. He says, oh, is that all? Okay. Well, it's a limited number of leaves on the tree, and it's not, he didn't say all the leaves in the whole forest. Narada said, no, it wasn't like that. He said, fantastic. At that very moment, the chariot comes down from heaven, and the driver says to this second man, come on, get in. I'm taking you to Lord Shiva, who has sent for you. And the man goes, I'm going to heaven now? He says, yeah. But Narada just told me I've got all of these lifetimes and everything before I can. The driver says, yes, but it seems that you were ready and willing to do that. So why should you wait? Come on. What about the other guy? He's not even ready to wait for births. Let him wait and work more. I love this story. It's just saying it's so much what's going on in here. Yes, we have to practice. All of that is absolutely true. But what is the effect of our practice, and where are we, and what state are we in? And this little story between the two. One goes, those leaves? Yeah, sure, I can do that. Yeah. And the other says, 4. No. So that sutra, where he says you have to practice for a long time without break, but he never says how long. There's something in there that's important for each of us to reflect on, I think. In Swamiji's commentary, he says, this is not a mere story. You can easily see the truth behind it. If you are that patient, your mind is more settled, and what you do will be more perfect. If you are unsettled and anxious to get the result, you are already disturbed. nothing done with that disturbed mind will have quality. So it is not only how long, because we all go through this moment, it's like, okay, how long have I been doing this? You know? But he's saying, yeah, but with what steadiness, with what quality of mind have we been doing this? So the practice is so important. And then that leads to the application. So it's not just practicing, it's not just doing these things, it is applying these things. And I know we've been talking about that over the course of the year, and I think that's one of the hard things for us to get a handle on. It's like, how does one apply these things in our lives? One of the questions that came up, I think, is, it's hard to express even, all of these sutras, you know, four-parters, on and on and on, commentaries, what is the thread that keeps us going through all of this? What is the thread? And I'm not saying necessarily the thread that Patanjali is saying, like, but for each of us, can we see a thread that has meaning for us, that allows us and keeps us going for a long time without break, with earnestness, so that we can feel that movement, actually a movement within, isn't it? Because there's a thread, so that as we do our practice with chanting, be it meditating, being whatever it is, that it doesn't feel separate from our lives. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at when I say thread. Something that says, whatever I'm doing here, when I'm in the temple, when I'm in the ashram, or whether I'm out there, what have you, there is a thread that connects it all. And so I'm not constantly working with difference. And I think that sometimes it can be missing. It can be, you know, or it can come in, because one of the things that Patanjali in particular talks about, he uses these, you know, phrases from Sanskrit, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha and Prakriti, you keep hearing that, Purusha and Prakriti. You know, Purusha basically being the self, the seer, and Prakriti being actually everything else. It's everything else, okay? And what he's saying from the very beginning is that our problem is these two elements of duality, when they get connected and mixed together, that is the problem. That is the problem, because that is the thing that gets in the way of us just seeing clearly our own true self, the Purusha, knowing that that's who we are, and everything else is something that we are observing. From the point of view of that, we are the witness, the Sakshi, the witness that just observes everything as it comes and it goes, because it will come and go, come and go. That has been described as a journey of no distance. We're not going anywhere. It's a journey inward. And Patanjali and all of his sutras and his philosophy is about, it's like a roadmap to go on that journey. This is how you do it. You need more detail? Well, go to the next pada. You need more detail? Go to the next pada, you know? So in the second pada, after he sets it up in the first, he walks us through the 8 limbs. And if you look at those and reflect on them deeply, you realize that the first, 4 or 5 are all about kind of out here. And then it starts to pull us in. So the yamas and the niyamas really are about, how do we settle that mind? How do we settle that mind? And you practice the yamas and the niyamas, that it helps to do that. And it's actually preparing us for meditation, the same as the asanas of yoga, of what we call hatha yoga. It's doing the same thing for the physical body. And then the pranayama is doing the same thing for the breath. It's like what he's providing is a means of us coming truly into ourselves by working from the outside in, until the last three angas of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, they're in the inner world. They're in the inner world. But he's preparing us for the inner world by saying, do these things as well. But without being harsh about it. You know, he's very clever. But I think the thing that Patanjali is trying to get us to see, and the commentators, the wise commentators are saying, if you can do these things, then it will all happen sooner. Maybe the chariot will come down sooner than we thought. Because, you know, we're settled and more settled. We keep settling ourselves rather than creating more, you know, anxiousness in everything. And I think that's the key that we have to keep coming back to, that Prakriti will always be there. There is a whole perspective in this, which is that when people say, well, why do we have to deal with all of that? There is a perspective that says Prakriti is there for us. And sometimes, in the most difficult times, we don't feel like it's really a big help. But the sages are saying, no. Ultimately, what happens because of Prakriti? Well, we find ourselves sitting in a hall like this. I mean, that's really what it's come to, hasn't it? You know, we, for whatever reason, for whatever circumstance in our life, we enter into the inner journey. And what the wise ones are saying is that it's because of that out there that we do that ultimately. So if you can change your perspective and see it in that way, it again settles you. So it's not a battle. It is simply saying to us, go within. Everything out there, from the subtlest perspective, is saying the only answer is to turn within. And when we get that message and it starts to resonate, then you run across, had a few things even towards the, yes, as we move through all of that, we get to a point, I've just jumped to the fourth pada. Okay. And we see things like this. Sutras are saying, due to its changelessness, it's referring to the Purusha, ourself, okay? Changes in the mind stuff are always known to the Purusha, who is its master. So it's saying, when it says due to its changelessness, it's saying due to the changeless nature of the self. Changes in the mind stuff are always known to the Purusha, who is its master. Of course, the challenge there is what? We have to identify more with the self than all of the changes. And the more we can do that, the more we can have the awareness that we are that self, and we are actually the owner of the mind stuff, of the thoughts, then our whole experience changes. Our whole experience changes. So what it's saying here is, therefore, our aim is not to keep the mind peaceful. Hear this well. He's saying, however clever we are, we can only keep the mind quiet for a little while. However clever we are, we can only keep the mind quiet for a little while. I mean, somebody here may say, no, I can do it all the time. Fine. But the sages are saying, nah, not quite. Therefore, our aim is not to keep the mind peaceful, but to rise above the mind. Rise above the mind. and realize the ever peaceful self. That's a really interesting and significant distinction, isn't it? If it's, and Baba used to always say, don't fight the mind. You'll never win that battle. Because the nature of the mind is to think. So yeah, we want to have some peace and quiet. But he's saying is that the real aim is to rise above the mind. How do you rise above the mind? By shutting off the phone. Yeah. Stopping the devices that are telling us your time is almost running out. Anyway, you rise above the mind by identifying with something other than the mind. And what is that something other than the mind? The self, the Purusha. So, I mean, to me, these kinds of comments are like really take us in the right direction. The Purusha is the owner of the mind stuff, because the Purusha, being changeless, can always recognize the changing nature of the mind. So we'll go through whatever we go through, but if we can come back to that self, that Purusha, then we realize it's just something we're going through. And we are not that which is happening all around us. And the next sutra says, the mind stuff is not self-luminous. The mind is not self-luminous because it is an object of perception by the self. So here it's saying the light is in the self. The self is the light. And it's only because of the light of the self that the mind can do what it does. But we shouldn't be confused and think we are the mind and all the thoughts. Go to the source, it's telling us here. Go to the source. The mind stuff is not the subject. It is the object. The mind stuff is not the subject. It is the object. Here he says, realize, to really have this awareness, this isolation of perceiver and perceived, the separation is important. That's the practice. You know that yesterday you had an experience on the mental level and it didn't bring you lasting satisfaction. You may say, I don't like it anymore and I don't want it. This is the last point. The true wisdom comes up. But then again, Maya, well, that'll be a subject of another talk. Maya tricks you. Oh yeah, yesterday it brought me pain, but today it's going to be wonderful. Let's go. And he gives the explanation and the reason. He says, that's because there is still the ego. That's because there is still the ego, which is the mind's basis. It really doesn't allow you to know who you are. It doesn't allow you to know who you are. That's why even though you are the self, the Purusha, you don't experience that always. When you hurt somebody else, you say, oh, I didn't do it, it was just my mind. When someone hurts you, you should feel the same way. Well, you didn't really hurt me, it was your mind, so I won't get angry with you. When we do it, however, we put the blame, when we do it, we put the blame on the mind. When someone else does it, we usually say, how dare you do that? How could you treat me that way? So you're lying in Shavasana, he points out, and everything is fine. You know, I'm not the body. The body is just lying here. I have that sense of the separation. I'm not that. But if you get up and someone says, oh, you gotten a little bit heavy there, haven't you? Instantly you're disturbed. How dare you say that? So now I am the body. The person didn't call you, the self, chubby, but called your body that. But the realization doesn't stay with us for that long. We should try to retain that awareness always. that we're the self. There is the stories about Bhagawan Nityananda, who used to say, Bhavana Rakho. Hold the feeling of the truth. Hold that feeling. Carry it with us. Otherwise, we slip back and again and again. These are just some reflections to find that, help us just find that thread to get back to really what the Yoga Sutras are all about. You know, it's finding that changelessness. The essence is that yoga is about being something, someone, not about becoming. And I think these are the kinds of things that we miss. So if we think about why Baba would have said, meditate on the self, honor the self, worship the self. In his words, he was saying what Patanjali saying, that you're not all that, but unless you get into the habit and stay with that habit of meditating on the self, your true nature constantly, for however long it takes, then we just keep slipping back. We keep slipping back. And that if there's any experience of light, it's always coming from our true self. And so let's go there as much as we can. And the more that we go to that true self, the more we will be uplifted by it. Two things as I wind this up. I think I mentioned before, and Devyani might have as well, Baba gave these aphorisms before he left for India in 1981. He asked us to repeat them aloud. And I'm not going to, ask you to repeat them aloud, but I want you to see how what he's saying here connects to what we are talking about when we study Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The first one was, I take refuge in a siddha. Going to understand that is, I take refuge in the Guru. We just finished chanting the Guru Gita. We chanted so much. Take refuge. And the whole idea of taking refuge is that you go to that, you hold on that to that. When things are difficult, when things are challenging in particular, but as we walk the path, we need that truth to walk with us. And a siddha, a really perfected being, is that. But then he goes further. He went further and said, the next one was, I take refuge in the community, the sangha of siddhas. So all the great beings, I take refuge. And I hold on to what they taught and who they are and what they brought to us. And then he says, I take refuge in my own self, which is what Patanjali is constantly talking about. I take refuge in my own self, not my mind, not my ego, not that, but myself. And he adds to that, and I surrender to my own self. I surrender to my own self. The next one is, I will not give up the contemplation of myself. So keep reflecting on that which is true. And next, I will not abandon the discipline of the great beings, the siddhas. Next, I will not forget my own mantra, which is the great gift of these great beings. And next, I will always maintain the awareness of the unity of Brahman, God, and self. I will always maintain that awareness. And finally, he said, the last vow, I will see everything as Shiva. I will never think that anybody or anything is different from Shiva. So you start to see how it all comes together and is connected. Because remember, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are really the essence of who we are. It's not something out there. It's not something different from us. And at all times, we have to, and this is what I was trying to convey in the beginning, we have to work our ways to pull what seems to be out there into ourself and realize it is almost as if it is ourself speaking to ourself. It is our inner self speaking to us from the outside, saying, turn back this way. And that's all the great beings and the scriptures will ever say to us. Look within, the answers lie there. And that's the journey to the self. Have a nice Sunday. Sagunath Maharaj Ki Jai. What's next on the program? Kirtan. I must have finished early.
Thank you so much for being here with us at this very special day. It was wonderful. The talks, I love it because there is always something that we can take home and practice. The announcements are this for the Saturday 29, which is next one, the intensive from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And as you know, there's going to be special video of the 4 Shanti Mandir ashrams in the world. And then on Sunday, during the Satsang, starting at 10:30 a.m. here, the sitar and tabla classical Indian music concert. So you come for the satsang and you get this meditative, they put here, experience because it transports you very powerfully. It is always said that music transports you, but I think Indian classical music is very powerful, fast track. And then on Monday we have the Lakshmi Puja, it's Monday the 24th, and it's 5:30 Arati here, and then the puja at 6. In other words, we keep the same timings the whole week and for all the events so nobody gets confused. So it's 5:30 Arati, then 6 p.m., the Lakshmi Puja. And I would recommend, if you have the time, to watch the video that Gurudev sent a message on the occasion of Deepavali, because he explains all the many meanings of these pujas. So I really don't have now the time, but it talks about death and wealth and health, and then about the treasurer of the wealth. So actually one is the god of health, one is the god of wealth, and there's a treasurer, so he's like the manager there. So all of these things, have a meaning of little pieces of information that we can relate to ourselves in life. And may I say that it's also a great exercise for people like me who are not native English-speaking people, that you have to learn to say the final like health and wealth and, and death. So what he says about death is more important than all the rest. If you can, catch up with that video tonight and then come tomorrow for the puja, you are very, very welcome and you will get more from it. So I think that's that. The next is the invitation to come for darshan and then join us for lunch prasad. Thank you. Maharaj ki jai.